So we and our guests coming to this virtual event from different places in the United States. The Pershing Square Signature Center sits on occupied territory known as Lenapehoking, the lands of the indigenous Native American and First Nations people of Lenape still here today. And while land acknowledgement is not enough, it is an important reminder and a way to contemplate the land on which we sit. Feel free to add in the chat the land where you are joining us from, and we'll just take a moment to breathe in and think about what we just heard. So thank you all for spending your time with us this evening over Zoom. One of the things that's nice about this, I said this evening, but we're here in sunlight. So feels a little bit like we're moving towards a positive, hopeful direction. As I said, so happy to see so many of our friends on the screen. Doesn't come anywhere close to seeing you in person at the center, but we will enjoy what we can right now. We know this has been a difficult and tumultuous time. A year has passed. We've all measured it in different ways. But we hope that you and those close to you are safe and healthy. And thank you all very much for your support during this last year. While we can't be in person together at Signature, um, your continued generosity, words of encouragement are keeping us going, literally, but also emotionally as well. I want to acknowledge some of our board members who are here with us tonight. Our board president, Nina Matus, Jimmy Ashey, our immediate past board president, Kate Roche Hope, Laurie Kramer, Kristen O'Hara, Michael Rausch, Susan Weiner, and Rich Willett. Of course, my partner, artistic director, Paige Evans, our artistic director, circle chair, Kathleen Collins is also here tonight, as well as our incredible Signature staff, the Zoom team behind the scenes. If you can bear with me for a second, I want to acknowledge and express our gratitude to many of our most generous supporters. It will take a moment to do it because we are really, really very fortunate at Signature to count among our friends as it's a pretty long group and pretty esteemed group. But I hope you'll acknowledge and thank them with us. And I missed that Donna Walker-Kuhn, our board member, is also here as well. So sorry about that, Donna. So I'm delighted that we're joined by our steadfast and generous partners, Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, the Jerome L. Green Foundation, the Howard Gilman Foundation, the Harold and Mimi Steinberg Charitable Trust, the Hearst Foundations, the Virginia B. Tolman Foundation, the Frederick Lowe Foundation, and we're joined by our friends at the Tao Foundation. As I said, this is quite esteemed company. Perhaps it goes without saying, but we are not joined by the foundations, but by our friends and partners and the leaders of those foundations who are leaders in the philanthropic field and what they've done, not just for Signature in the last year, but for the arts and cultural field more broadly, will bring back the whole field. So we're grateful for what they've done for us, but for so many of our peers. And of course, we're thrilled to have our resident playwright, Anna Deavere Smith, here with us as well. Hello, Anna. I'd like to also thank the members of our Artistic Director Circle who are here. You represent our highest level individual supporters, and we're also grateful for your generosity, your commitment, your friendship to Signature. And with that, I would like to introduce Signature's artistic director, my partner, and Paige Evans, and then Anna.
Thank you, Harold. And thank you all so much for being here. It's such an incredible group, and I'm so glad that you could all join us. And Anna, thank you for being here tonight and for everything you've been doing with us at Signature and for us. It is just so great to have you in residence. So Anna is a Residence 1 playwright at Signature. We started her residency with Fires in the Mirror last fall, and we were planning to produce her play Twilight Los Angeles this past spring. And because of COVID, we had to stop and close the theater right before rehearsals began. So we are producing Twilight now in the fall. We're really looking forward to it. And in the meantime, Anna has become such an important part of Signature's community. And you've been so engaged, Anna. We're all so grateful. I in particular, but all of us. Anna hosted some SIG Summit talks digitally this fall with people who had been involved with Twilight in one way or another. She has been working with us most recently on a preview piece of Twilight that's going to be coming out in April. And she has agreed to be our first Artistic Award honoree at our gala on May 6th. So I hope that all of you can be there on May 6th. And Anna, we're so delighted that you're joining us tonight and that you'll be at the gala with us too. So I'm going to ask some questions of Anna, and then we'll open it up. Some of you sent in questions beforehand, so thank you for doing that. And we'll also open up the conversation for questions in the chat, and Maggie Green will oversee that part of the Q&A. So Anna, my first question for you goes back to the beginning of your career. What were some of your early influences as an actor and theater maker? You started out as a trained actor and you continue to act, but what were early influences and inspirations for you?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and Harold for including me, and for, it's really important for artists to feel that they have some kind of a home. And I'm very peripatetic. And so I have felt really the embrace of the Signature Theater this year. And I want to thank you, Paige, for that, and for the conversations that we've had together. I've always found you to be so smart and practical and right on. And I just want to say how much I've enjoyed your company. And I also want to thank, as Harold did, the people who are here tonight who have also supported not just the Signature, but the theater and the arts at just such a crucial time and a very transformative time.
Absolutely.
In terms of my, I really didn't even start getting involved in the theater till I was in my 20s. Actually, I just walked into this theater. I haven't thought about it in a long time, called the Grassroots Theater Company in San Francisco on Potrero Hill. It was started by Ed Bullins, the playwright Ed Bullins, who came really out of the Black arts movement, and a really interesting guy called John Doyle. I literally walked in one day. I remember John being the head of the company, and he was sweeping the floor, which I thought was just the coolest thing. And I just said I would like to get involved, and they hired me as a stage manager. I knew nothing about stage managing, nothing whatsoever. So, but I was kind of like, I think about like the interns, people want to be interns around. I guess that's how I was. But then I ultimately got trained at the American Conservatory Theater, a classical training. My Shakespeare teacher was very important to me, Juanita Pratt Rice. She was a bit of an activist as well, one of those Bay Area activists, very involved in the time in Latin America. She always wore army fatigues mostly all the time. My yoga teacher, who was like a spiritual leader for me at that time. And I think most importantly, the fellow students, because when you're in a conservatory training, it's really important, the things, the relationships, the conversations that you have outside of class. City Lights bookstore. I guess what I'm saying really is San Francisco and the magic of that place, the beauty of it. I would say among the many artists who have affected me, I think the person who really had the biggest effect to people, Adrian Kennedy, the playwright Adrian Kennedy, and also Studs Terkel, who's actually, as you know, was the late Studs Terkel was a famous journalist, but he did write a play called Working, which was based on real people. And then ultimately I did, in the end, become a friend of Studs, but that was after my career took off.
So that, thank you, Anna. That's terrific, really interesting. So that actually leads into the next question that I had, and Studs Terkel may be the answer to this, but just how did you develop the practice of interviewing people and then portraying them on stage? And also in tandem with that, how do you observe a person's physical language and then integrate it into the performance, into your performance?
Well, everything goes back to Shakespeare, and a couple people on this Zoom may know the story already, but it goes back to Juanita Pat Rice, who in the first Shakespeare class, was just trying to get across the fact that when you're performing in Shakespeare, you don't stop and think about it or wander around in emotions. You just say the words and it will take you there, which I thought was just a really, really, for some reason, I was very, just taken with that. I had been a language major for a while. Maybe it had something to do with that. But she gave us two examples in King Lear, where Lear speaks in an irregular way. So we think about Shakespeare as being iambic pentameter, da 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 da. And she said, if people change that, and if they say, for example, da 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 da, this is a moment to pay attention that there may be something emotional going on. And she gave the example in King Lear when everything's completely falling apart, and Lear says, never, 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 never. And I, at first I was trying to understand everything I possibly could about Shakespeare, which is one reason I bonded with Juanita Pat Rice. I was always hanging out with her. I remember her thesis was about Shakespeare, me reading it, not her thesis, PhD dissertation. And I was just really interested. And then I thought, after a couple of years of that, you're not going to be a Shakespeare scholar. But if what you're interested in really is the relationship of language to identity and the relationship of language to crisis, maybe you can learn about this with real people. And so that's why I started interviewing real people. And the first one of my shows that I made in New York in, I think it was 1980 or 1981, I had other actors. It wasn't just me. And I literally just walked up to people and said, I know an actor who looks like you. If you'll let me interview you for an hour, I invite you to see yourself performed. And so there were 20 actors and 20 real people. The lifeguard at the Y, Meredith Monk, the great composer, a hairdresser, a very shishi beauty salon. And, that's really where I practiced it. And I realized how much I loved real people and the way that they talk. And that's what, sort of all, I think for, if there's any artists on this Zoom as well, all the things we do have multiple places of origin, of course.
Great, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about how Twilight evolved out of Fires in the Mirror? They were in very close succession, one almost immediately after the other. Can you talk about how one played into the other?
Well, I really don't think I would have been here, or I don't think my work would have gotten acknowledged without the Los Angeles riots. Even though Twilight came after Fires in the Mirror, I believe that the ability for us, I don't think it's unique to the United States, to look at our problems and challenges for a long time, it's very hard. The window is very brief. And actually, there were people involved with Fires in the Mirror who warned me at my first reading that people wouldn't be interested in the play because it was about race relations. So we go forth anyway. and Christopher Ashley was the director. Tulani Davis, who was extraordinary, was the dramaturg. We go forth anyway. Candy Donnelly was the costume designer. And so it's time for the first preview. And it's always very terrifying for me because it's an enormous amount of material that I have to know and all this stuff. And I'm not really psychologically built in the typical way that many actors are. Anyway, it's kind of have to drag me out there. I'm not dying to get out there. And so the Los Angeles riot had happened the night before. And so I came from dress rehearsal. Remember, this is when we had, you know, answering machines, and like all of my light was blinking, and friends from LA had contacted me on the phone and said, you've got to turn on the television. I know you're in dress rehearsal. You probably don't know what's going on. It was the riot. So the next day, as we were preparing for our first preview at the Public Theater, the general manager came in and said, this theater is closing down. And she looked like it took all her might to come in and tell us, you know, the show would not go on. We were thrilled. me and Christopher Ashley and Candy Donnelly immediately went to Times Square. We thought there was going to be a demonstration. So the point I'm trying to make is that, for one thing, I think that Fires in the Mirror had you know, a very robust audience. It got extended and all this stuff, because people wanted to understand really what was going on in Los Angeles, which was a much bigger uprising than what had happened in Crown Heights. And Gordon Davidson came to see the play, the late Gordon Davidson, extraordinary producer, the head of the Mark Taper Forum. And you know, we went out for breakfast. I remember it was at the Algonquin, and we kind of looked at each other. He said, well, what's next? He was quite taken with Fires in the Mirror. And we said, you know, we kind of simultaneously said, oh, guess I should come to LA. And so there I went soon. I went in September to start doing my interviews, and then the play was on by May.
Can you tell us a little about how you found your interview subjects? I think you interviewed about, is it 300 people or 300 interviews altogether?
Yeah.
So a broad range of people. How did you figure out who to speak with?
Well, it was over 300 people. And, you know, I think the basic for all of the things I do is that you find one person and that person tells you about another person. But, you know, in the case of this, which was a huge internationally watched event, first thing you could do is just open up a magazine and start circling names. And then you go from person to person. But it was also very important to me. I thought of Twilight as an opera, and I thought of Fires in the Mirror as a, you know, sort of a concerto or a smaller piece, bigger than a duet, but not, you know, this was just so much bigger in every way. And one of the main reasons it was bigger is, if you really looked at the Los Angeles riot, it opens up the lens of American race relations beyond black and white to all these other complicated relationships. And so for me to do that bigger operation, really, I had to have people who helped me go all over the city, however it was. In the case, you know, I invited with Rob Mercado put together that great event where I was able to interview people, including Twilight himself, after whom the play was named. It's a real person. Twilight Bay was a gang member. My muse gets the last word in the play. Well, Twilight helped me meet people, but also Hector Tobar, who at the time was a journalist at the Los Angeles Times, still is, Pulitzer Prize winning novelist, and Doreen Kondo, a professor of American Studies at USC. The two, they were very important, you know, in terms of not just Hector taking me around to his beat, which was Latin, you know, many different Latinx communities in Los Angeles, but also helping me think about how to open up this lens. And in fact, you know, and with Doreen, it was thinking about the Asian American community. I want to say one more thing about that. But at a certain point, I thought, oh my God, maybe I'm not Black enough here. And I called my friend Elizabeth Alexander, you know, the poet, and asked her to join us, just to make sure that I kept my eye also on the Black community. So we had this extraordinary group of people. And then, you know, the most important thing that happened in that time, and Paige, you've heard me say this many times, is that I got a phone call. You know, people are very concerned about how their communities would be represented, understandably. And I got a phone call from two graduate students at USC who were Korean American. And they informed me that they heard about what I was doing, quote unquote, and that they thought I was going to get it wrong. Said it just like that. We heard about what you're doing, and we think you're going to get it wrong. But here's the most important part. So we would like to help you. Mm. And they took me around their community. They translated for me. There's no way I would have had that kind of access. So And the Black community itself was, I mean, there it was like, certain people, there were arguments about whether people said it was a riot, whether it was an uprising, whether it was a revolution. So I had to find people who would help me move around that community in a way. And then Gordon, in terms of what I call the official language, Gordon knew everybody. So I, talked to Charlton Heston, certainly was able to talk to the police commissioner, and I talked to Daryl Gates 3 times, the former chief of police, who was very controversial at the time.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And you mentioned an opera for Twilight and a concerto for Fires. Much of your work does feel like musical composition, with different voices being woven through the pieces and themes being woven through the pieces. Can you talk a little bit about the role of music and the influence of music in your work?
Well, I mean, now I pretty much don't even want to think about a work without a live musician. And that really started with working with Bobby McDuffie, concert violinist, when we did a production, we did some performances of Martin Luther King's Letter from Birmingham Jail. And he used that beautiful piece that everybody on the Zoom would know if we heard it, Spiegel and Spiegel of Arvo Pärt. Beautiful. And, who would think of music by an Estonian composer under Martin Luther King's words, but it worked. And then my play on Grace, which never got finished, was always in workshop with a concert cellist, Joshua Roman. And then finally, perhaps some of the people on the Zoom saw Notes from the Field, where I had live on stage Marcus Shelby, who is a jazz bass player. And, I hired Marcus before I hired a director. I mean, that is just how important music is to me now. And in part, it's because the people's voices are musical. Not just the timbre and the tone, but the rhythms within which they speak are musical. And particularly when they're trying to talk in the midst of a crisis, the language is so original that I think of it as a composition. So, and I'm very proud that my mentee, a jazz pianist and a graduate of Juilliard, is going to be underscoring the video that we're going to do for the brief. Maybe you'll talk about that, because I don't know how much folks know about it. But so music is really critical. And the last thing I want to say is, one of the people who I had performed in Twilight was the late Jessie Norman. And I said, well, when did you start singing? And she said, well, I sang before I could speak. And she said, my siblings teased me that soon you're going to say you were singing in the womb. And, Judith Jamison, the great dancer, said, when I asked her, when did you start to dance? She said, I was dancing in the womb to the rhythm of my mother's heart. And so I think that, Miss Norman's siblings laughed at her, but I think she probably was singing in the womb, that this is something that is so fundamental to how we are.
That's beautiful, Anna. Thank you. I have many other questions for you, but I do want to be mindful of time, and we have a lot of guests here who are very eager to hear from you as well. So as I mentioned earlier, I think a few people sent in questions beforehand, and we're getting some now in the live chat. So I'm going to turn it over to Maggie Green, but thank you so much, Anna. It's so fascinating always to talk with you and hear your answers to questions.
Great. Hello, everyone. So I just want to open it up first if anybody has some questions. But before I get to that, I just want to run over the kind of Zoom logistics of the question and answer period. So just remember to mute yourself if you're not speaking. And if you're on the phone, you can press *6 and that will unmute you. Sorry, my cat is singing with me. Just, the joys of live Zoom theater. Okay, so you can virtually raise your hand using the functions at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you click reactions, you can then select the raise hand icon. You can also physically raise your hand, and we'll have some spotters amongst the development staff kind of looking out to see who's being like me. And we'll keep an eye on you there. You're also welcome to type in your question into the chat, which is also at the bottom of your screen. Yeah, so once you have been selected, we will we'll let you know that you can ask your question, and then we'll give you the floor. So does anyone have questions to kind of start us off? We have some as well that came in, but I wanted to open up to some live questions first. Let's see if we see anyone. I see Cynthia Tong. You have a question? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah. Hi, I have a question about how do you yourself, knowing the identity you are and who you are, how do you walk into these situations and try and tell other people's stories? What you said about the Korean Americans helping you out and doing that, I think was really incredible. But I guess I'm always thinking about now as a art maker myself, how we can represent other people's stories accurately and their voices, and then also my own feelings in these moments. How do you negotiate all of that? That's my question.
What's your art form? I'm sorry, I don't know. Huh?
I'm a producer, a creative producer.
Okay, cool, great. Well, I mean, it's really honestly something that I like to engage people in, would be a longer conversation for you and I to have, preferably not in public, because I think it's a very important question right now. It's a question that I actually didn't start to hear until the early 2000s, and mostly in academic environments. I think is it the word accurate? I'm not sure. I think it's about the quality of the engagement, to tell you the truth. And then how do you do that? So for example, Native Americans, until I wrote Notes in the Field, I had been very cautious because I had been, told by a Native American poet that she did not want to talk to me. And I completely understood that, because first of all, my basic rule is I want to go where people are screaming it from a mountaintop, and I happen to be walking by. So everybody who talks to me, in order for it to work, given all the things I do and think about, they have to have a strong will to communicate. By the way past me to an audience. And they're usually aware that I'm just a pass-through. So those are the kind of people I'm looking for. And that's also why I usually go in environments where there's a crisis, or where people feel they have not been heard, or by the way, I'm not giving them voice, they have voice. They have not been heard, or they feel that something is unjust. So when I wrote Notes from the Field, I went to a Native American reservation, and let me show you something. People say that this looks like an altar. By the way, that's Lyle Ashton Harris's work. I went to the Yurok Reservation in Northern California. The chief judge is the most no-nonsense person you will ever meet in your life. I interviewed her, and she opened up the tribe to me. She gave me somebody to take me around to do many interviews. After I left, she wrote me an email saying, "People like you. You belong by the river with us." It's a salmon fishing tribe. Well, if you knew anything about my life journey, you would know that's like one of the most important things. I would say it's among the 5 most important things that have ever been said to me, including my mother singing a lullaby. That's how important it is. And she has sent me, people say it looks like an altar. She has sent me these 2 figurines from her tribe, which are storytellers. And so that's what I mean by, I don't think there's a rule. I don't think it's about accuracy. I think it's about the quality of the engagement. Does that help?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's great to be hearing about Twilight Los Angeles right now. It's such a unique time again. And I'm actually in Los Angeles right now. I'm based in New York. So it's all coming together right now. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. It looks like Michael and Betty Rausch have their hand electronically raised. You have the floor.
I'm wondering when you first interview somebody, if they see you as playwright, actor, or as more like reporter, storyteller.
Well, I'm doing a series of interviews right now in Chicago about gun violence.
Mm.
And, about young men and young women, girls who are caught up in that. And girls are very involved now in ways that are very also of great concern. I think they don't think about it that way. Somebody says, will you, talk to Anna? They don't know who I am. Certainly don't know about my work in the theater. One among them said, wait a minute. I've been looking at you all this time. Were you a nurse? Were you on that show? Nurse Jackie. So the individuals who I talk to don't know about my theater. I'm not famous enough as a cultural figure for them necessarily to know who I am. Again, I'm counting on the person who helps me meet somebody. And then it's up to me to try to sort of open the floor so that, and I talk all the time now in different ways about two concepts. One is radical hospitality and one is radical welcome. And so, I can't extend any real hospitality on Zoom, which is how I'm doing this work in Chicago right now. But am I available? That's about all I can say. And then it's about them. It's not about me. It has to be not about me as fast as possible, if that makes sense.
Great. I wanted to just throw in one of these questions that came in before the event. So this one is from Alex Sanger, and it says, do you recommend any strategies for advancing the next generation of female playwrights? Where should time, effort, and funding be targeted?
Well, I would like us, in some cases, to go back to antiquity and think about, the patron and the poet. And the patron obviously was the patron of the poet, but the poet was a spiritual patron of the patron. And I think some people should think about, just supporting an individual artist for a year. Again, another I wouldn't be here but story. I was a professor at Stanford on the tenure track, scared to death, got an opportunity to get a fellowship to Harvard. Stanford let me go, supported half my salary. The fellowship supported the other half. It was a year, the first year of my adult life, that I didn't have to go to work every day, and everything changed. And so it's the gift of time that so many artists need. And however that can happen, whether it's directly to an artist or through an institution, so that they can be supported to work, I would say. That's one way. That's one way. But there are many ways, of course, supporting along with existing organizations, supporting initiatives, making those initiatives specific if folks are interested in a genre, or a movement of, in this case, you're talking about women artists, lots of different ways. Hope that kind of answers the question.
It looks like we have a question from Irv Weiser submitted beforehand, but it looks like Irv, you just messaged me if you'd like to ask it yourself. Feel free to do that.
Yep. Thank you. Anna, thank you so much. We've enjoyed your work immensely. And I read Twilight, and I'm curious and interested in your reaction to 30 years later, the events in Minneapolis around the murder of George Floyd, and what you learned from your experience in writing Twilight and interviewing all those people that might educate us about what is going on today and how we can better understand the circumstances. It was, I have to say, it was disheartening to just read your play this past weekend and to re-experience that through the George Floyd murder as if no progress has been made. Your reaction to that?
Sure. I mean, when I, well, a number of things, of course, but, one of the things I did in the wake of the murder of George Floyd and others this summer was to go back and look at the Kerner Commission report, which was written in the 60s during all of the racial unrest at that time. And, I mean, it's stunning how many uprisings there were in the 60s, just stunning. And as a character or woman, Maxine Waters says in Twilight, she evokes in 1992 and 3, she evokes the Kerner Commission report and says, what happened to Rodney King happened in the 60s, also there was an insurrection in the city before, also around police violence. And she talked about the Kerner Commission report and said what the report cited still exists today. And some of the possibilities, some of the plans still exist today. And that's now. I was reading something about an unrest in 1921. And the suggestions today, the suggestions aren't unlike the suggestions we would make right now about how to make things better. So what I'm saying is, we know what to do. We just aren't doing it. History has told us what to do, and we're not doing it. I think that individuals like you who are concerned can express your dismay, your outrage, your sadness to people who who are in powerful positions in different places and can do things to either correct what's going on with the police or to do the things that are all affiliated with the problem of inequity.
Thank you,
Great.
Anna. We just have a few minutes left, I think, right? So
Yeah.
Maggie.
I have 2 questions that were submitted in advance I'd love to be able to get to, so maybe we can end with these 2. One of them came in from Terry Law, and it says, how do you think COVID and this pandemic will affect theater going forward? Also, I see that you're a professor as well. Do you see any permanent changes in the education system as a result of what we've been through in the last year?
I mean, the big thing about that question is I think it's all like hang on to your hats. We just don't know. I do think that, because I have the opportunity to teach, graduate students at NYU Tisch School of the Arts who are, very wonderful and have a lot of wonderful opportunities while in school. I think, they're becoming very thoughtful about how we get out of this and maybe change some things. They are in a position to want to make a new day in the arts anyway. Recently I was on a panel with very thoughtful people, among them Kate Levin at Bloomberg, who and our former cultural commissioner, who I know, a mind like Kate's is just churning with new ideas. At the same time, there are young people who are younger artists who are asking for us to have something like what Roosevelt provided in terms of a federal theater and federal arts programs. So I think the sky's the limit about what could happen, what kinds of ways this will affect institutions, what kinds of ways it will affect art forms, and how people think about culture and art.
Great. And our last question came in from Janet Kane-Scapin, and it says, I don't have a specific question about for Anna, but I have been feeling sentimental about early theater memories during the lockdown. Perhaps she could share an early memory as an audience member with us from a theatrical experience.
Oh, wow, that's such a wonderful question. Well, I was a little girl. I grew up in a segregated town, and my mother was in a club that was, very, taking us to see plays and, you know, I guess a way of gathering together, you know, little middle class Negro children. And but I think about honestly seeing my mother um, in a Christmas play in my elementary school where she taught briefly as the reading specialist. I think seeing my mother in a play was so interesting, right? Because there she, and I wonder about people who have famous parents in that way of, you know, there she is and she's different there. I would say that one, seeing my mother in a Christmas play at my school.
Great. Well, that's all I have from the question side of things. So I think I'll turn it over to Harold.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Paige and Anna, for being our featured guests tonight. And Anna, just being so generous with your time. I feel a little bit greedy because I would love to spend hours and hours listening to you, but an hour is truly a gift and makes me think that you know, we're in this moment where people are starting to get vaccinated, gratefully, and it's sort of renewal of the body. We are moving, I think, towards a period of hopefully renewal of our spirit as we move into reopening, and especially hearing from you, Anna, renewal of our purpose and why we are doing what we're doing, and why, as you said, we know what to do. We're just not doing it, and we have to do it. We have to do it, and we have to do it better. So thank you. I want to quickly recognize, neglected earlier, 3 more trustees. We have a good crowd here tonight: Doug Chittenden, Tim Little, David Clafter. And thank you again to all of our supporters here. It's not quite like sitting in a theater in a performance, but it's very close. And it reminds us of, I think, or for me, of why we will be so eager to come back and to gather in a room and to see Anna's words brought to the stage. So hope to see you all soon, and hope you please stay healthy, and we'll look forward to staying connected.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, everybody. And thank you, Anna, particularly
Thank
for
you.
being our guest. You were terrific. It's great to see you, everybody.
Back at you.
Thanks.
Thank you.